I did want to maybe see if you all wanted to comment on sort of what maybe makes this whole space different, if anything, from some of the other enterprise data management, enterprise data analytics applications that maybe you heard about today or in general. And I think we could probably guess what some of them are. You know, the spatiotemporal features. I think there's probably something to say about this citizen engagement or the general public actually cares and knows, which maybe social networking sort of has that in common, but maybe doesn't have in other areas. And then maybe given those particular challenges or particular characteristics, is there anything that the room full of or some people in the room are technologists, what should they be working on to sort of help solve some of these unique challenges in urban data? And maybe I'll address that to anybody who wants to speak up.
So I can kind of touch base on something I mentioned earlier, and it's the fact that, you know, by being a monopoly and being regulated, we don't really have a choice of which customers do we want to serve. You know, often if you think about some other industries, they're like, well, we're going to focus on the high value add customers, or you know, you put different labels. We have to serve everyone. So I think that is a challenge because we can't really tailor all the programs to the same extent that a niche or a segment-focused company would. So all our programs have to be applicable to all customers, and that becomes a big challenge. I think, you know, that's probably, to me, the single most difficult thing.
I mean, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, at least with respect to government, our government customers, is they generally are uncomfortable charging for their access for the consumption side, right? So consumption of their data is something that, you know, cost recovery is a possibility, but, you know, sometimes that ends up creating a very different business where you have to meter and consider like your internal costs and kind of project them back onto the provider. Because, you know, in the non-government world, typically if you have incredibly valuable data, you charge people to get access to it. So that creates a lot of interesting phenomenon.
Any thoughts from the audience? Yeah, go ahead. You guys can duke it out for the...
So how aware are you of the correctness of the data? So if you're collecting data from, I could see how sensor data might have not so many issues, but if you're collecting data from public documents and things like that, I can imagine people aren't putting in always the correct data. And so how do you deal with that kind of?
Is that
Actually, so I noticed in his talk he had it, and you guys are also incorporating that kind of data as well.
Okay, so for me, for example, right, so the data that we collected from a taxi, for example, a lot of them are on the rivers. So the things that, you know, for example, the taxi dots, they're not on the road, but on the rivers, which is impossible, right? So that was why we didn't try to do subsamples, because if we try to subsamples, those sample data will gone away. They wouldn't see that that's dirty data. So we try to present to the users like the true view of the data. So in the process, the human has to be there to really see, is it wrong, is it right or not, and tagging the data is correct or not. So we try to put the user in the loop to verify the data for us.
Well, so the San Francisco data, I would expect, would have a lot of, you know, documents released from public record or something. So how do you guarantee or ensure that that data is correct? And are there uncertainties associated with it? And do you keep track of that?
Yeah, I mean, from Socrata's vantage, you know, we push that burden back to our consumers as the end kind of owners of the data. So what we try to do is build tools that make it possible for them to detect anomalies easily. So, you know, I mentioned, you know, an example where our customers might think, for example, that, you know, that an entire column of data is an anonymized user, but, you know, our entity detection might detect that there's actually something else in there, credit card numbers or something else. So in general, that's our philosophy, is to really create the tools and try to detect and flag things where we see them possible.
Two questions about taxis in New York. Uber data, I guess, is not government, and I guess you don't have insight to it. How does it affect your models?
So actually, Uber data is very interesting. The city hasn't got a hold of Uber data yet, so they refuse to share the data. So which is why they haven't really truly operated in the city yet, right? So we have data on the black car limousine, things like that. But we're still missing a big segment on Uber. So our view of the city transmission is still incomplete. So I think if we really have the data from Uber, we really have a complete how people move inside the city. It's really at a new level of information to data. Yeah.
Okay, and another question which is a little bit higher level than that, because we heard multiple groups here using government data. And I guess there are a lot of other groups using government data. Don't we have like segmentation and siloing of all of this government data? If I want to go and start analyzing government data, where is the search engine that will tell me which one of the group or the umpteen companies that are taking government data and do some reports? How can I go in a comprehensive way find out all of this?
Yeah, so we recently launched a site called opendatanetwork.com. You can go there and search across all the data, open data that's in our platform and get access to it. That's one way. The other thing is we go out of our way to help annotate data sets efficiently so that when they get indexed by Google, they wind up being kind of SEO optimized so that those sites appear reasonably well. And then there's a number of other companies out there too that are aggregating public data sets. So
one more.
This is for the smart meter data. My town went all digital on the smart meters. There were lots of issues. Case was filed in the High Court. The problem was, how much data do you collect, and how do you ensure that the privacy is maintained of the data? Because they have shown that if you have access to the data, you can actually tell very precisely when a home is empty. There's no one inside.
So the key point behind it is really we have an extremely strict data governance policy around the data. Essentially, it cannot leave the company. It has to stay within a firewall. There's a lot of data security that happens on the grid, on the network. It's one of the big kind of industries that has grown over the last few years, in a niche industry in the energy world, where you want to make sure that there's no interference and that no one can access that data externally. Because yes, you're right. There's a lot of implications of how you can misuse it, but at the same time, it's something that's limited to also a very small group within PG&E of people that have access to that data. And at the same time, they have to kind of follow quarterly compliance through trainings and report on how to use it so that we make sure that it never kind of leaves the firewall of the company.
Maybe the last question here.
Hi, I had a question about open data. You mentioned about having a platform that would retrieve the data from different government sites and users. I was wondering if there is options for users to provide extra information back to the government, something like a feedback. For example, if I see a traffic violation, I'll report it, take a picture, send it to like a site or server, which government resources can use also for prosecuting.
if I understand the question correctly, is there facilities for citizens to provide data back into the government?
Yes.
From our vantage, it's a function of the government system or service that they're gathering the data from. So there are many cases where that happens, where citizens can report in and impact. But from our vantage, currently we're primarily read-only.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe we'll close there since we're a little over time. Thank the speakers one more time.